This is just, oh my god. I'm only halfway through, but oh my god, I can't speak. Or oh my god. I can't speak. Hey everyone, my name is Ryan and I'm back with my February wrap-up. So I ended up reading 13 books in February, which is a lot because historically, February is a really low reading month for me. Like this time last year, I think I read 4 books in February. So to have 13 this month is a lot for this time of year for me. So with that, let's get into it. To start off the month, I read I Would Leave Me If I Could by Halsey. This is a poetry collection by Halsey. I used to be a really big fan of her music when I was in high school, but I've kind of fallen off of it a little bit. But it did really pique my interest because I did really used to like her, and I am looking to get more into poetry, so I picked it up just cuz. But this one was a bit disappointing for me, and I don't know if it's because I've outgrown Halsey's music or if it's because maybe her songwriting didn't translate well to poetry for me, but a lot of it felt very amateur, like something that I would see a high schooler write. There were some poems that I liked in here, and I liked how graphic and open and raw it was. I also liked that she carried a lot of phrases word for word through different poems at different points of the book. I just thought that was interesting to read from, to see how the same phrase can be used differently in different poems. But overall, I didn't really think that this was anything special. Sometimes I think with poetry for me, it either hits or it doesn't, and I don't really think that this was one that hit for me. So as a whole, I ended up rating this 2 stars. Next, I read A Torch Against the Night by Saba Tahir. This is the second book in the Ember in the Ashes series. If you want to know my thoughts on that, I mentioned it in my January wrap-up, so I will link that on the screen. And this was a disappointment for me as well. I don't really know what happened to me this month, but for some reason, I just couldn't get into the second book. This book opened up the world a lot more than what we saw in the first book, and we got a lot more of the magical elements of this world, which I enjoyed. But overall, I just kind of found myself not caring. I couldn't really get immersed in it, and I didn't really care about the characters or really much of the plot. And this might just be because of how it was written, because we do get multiple points of view in here, but they're all in first person. And sometimes when we get multiple first person points of views, I end up getting them confused with each other. So that might have contributed to why I couldn't really get into it. I didn't dislike it, but overall I kind of felt like it was just middle of the road, just kind of okay, but I don't really care enough about the story to continue on with the series. But I am going to give this second book a 3 stars. Next, I read Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson, and I actually read this one on audiobook. This is a middle grade memoir written in verse about just Jacqueline Woodson's life as she was growing up, switching homes between the South and New York and Ohio for a little bit. And it's about her and her relationship with her siblings and her family and just her life as she was growing up. I loved this. Me and my mom actually read it together on an audiobook, and we both really enjoyed it. It's one of those books where nothing big really happens, but I still feel like it's just so special. The writing in this was very beautiful, and we read the audiobook, and Jacqueline Woodson actually narrates the audiobook herself, so I thought that that was a really interesting element to add to the reading experience. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. It was just a nice, beautiful story about a young girl growing up wanting to be a writer and trying to figure out where it is that she calls home. And I would definitely recommend it, and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read We Should All Be Feminist by Chimamanda and Gosei Adichie. And this is a really short essay about the connotations behind the word feminist and kind of going into what the word actually means and what it means to be a feminist and why everyone should be a feminist. In theory, this book should be great. and right up my alley. And there were some things in this book that I enjoyed, but overall, and I felt this way about her other essay as well. I read Dear Ijuele in January, and I felt the exact same way about it. I kind of feel like the information in here is just very entry-level feminist, which is fine. I think that's valuable for some people. Like, not everybody needs high-level feminist theory, but for me, I think I need a little bit more to my books on feminism because this one just kind of felt a little basic for me. And the other thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way in this book is that there's a whole section where she talks about the biological differences between women and men. Like, there's a whole section where she talks about, you know, men have more muscle mass and women think differently, and men have this and women have this, and it rubbed me the wrong way, and I don't think she meant it intentionally, but in my head reading that, it kind of feels a little bit exclusionary to the trans experience, and it just felt very binary as well. But I also kind of think that maybe it's just an issue with the length of this book, because this is just a very short essay. It's only like, I think like 60 or so pages. Maybe if it was longer, she might have gone more into that kind of stuff, but maybe it's just the fact that this essay is so short, she didn't have enough time or space to really dive into the nuances of what she's trying to say there. And I'm actually not going to rate this one just because I feel weird. I don't really have a system for rating nonfiction yet, and I feel weird rating nonfiction. So I've decided for now, until I read more of it, I'm not going to rate nonfiction unless it's to give it 5 stars. And this was definitely not 5 stars, so I'm just not going to rate it. Next, I read Love Beyond Body, Space, and Time, edited by Hope Nicholson. This is a short story collection featuring stories that are all by queer Indigenous authors about the queer Indigenous experience. I loved this so much. I don't read short story collections very often, but I am looking to get more into them, and this did not disappoint. One of the things that I loved about this is that we get a foreword talking about why this book was written, and it talks a lot about queer people's place in Indigenous communities and how through colonization there has been a real conscious effort to erase the history of queer Indigenous people. So yeah, if you pick this up, I would say definitely read the foreword. It's very valuable and very powerful, and I learned a lot from it. As for the stories, I thought that they were all very excellent, and one of the things that I really like about this collection is that even though they're all science fiction, they're all sort of varying degrees of science fiction. You know, there's some in the beginning where there's, you know, down here a little bit of light sci-fi where it's more based in the real world with a little bit of sci-fi elements, but then as you go on, there's like spaceships and aliens and stuff, and a lot more of the higher sci-fi. And I also love that this book really focused on the Two-Spirit Indigenous experience, and I thought that that was such a powerful experience to read from, and I would definitely recommend it. There were stories in here that were happier, and there were some in here that were more deeper and emotional, and there were bits in here that made me angry, and I really enjoyed this collection, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Next, I read All the American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley. This is a young adult novel about the story of 2 boys, and one of them is a boy named Rashad, and he is black, and he has been wrongfully accused of stealing something from a convenience store and then was attacked by a police officer. And then on the other side of it was a boy named Quinn who is white, and it's the story of him learning about racial injustices as Rashad's story is taking over his school and everyone's talking about it, and it's him learning basically about racism and racial injustice and police brutality. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was so powerful. And I was a little skeptical at first just because I'm really wary about books about Black stories and the Black experience, but that center around white feelings. And that's kind of what I thought that this would have been, just because a lot of it is told through Quinn's perspective and how he as a white person is learning about all of this. So I was a little wary at first, but I think what really made it land for me is that we also get Rashad's perspective, and we get his side of the story, and we get him after everything happens as he has to struggle with what this means for his life. And I thought that the way that the two boys' stories were tied together was incredibly done, especially because these two boys don't actually know each other. So I thought that the way that they were so intertwined was really powerful. This book has so much to say on what a white person's role in racial injustice is, as far as, you know, speaking up and educating yourself and doing your part to be an ally and not let racism just be swept under the rug. And I especially like what this book had to say about not following the beliefs of your family, because your beliefs are your own. And there were some moments in here that were so powerful, and I think that this book is very valuable and that a lot of people would learn a lot from it, and I think that it's absolutely worth the read, and I gave this book 5 stars. Next, I read Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book in the Grisha trilogy, and I actually have a vlog where I read this book, so I will link that on the screen. And I talked about this in my vlog, but overall, there are certain moments in this book that I really love, right? And I loved a lot of the new characters that we got, and I thought that the ending was absolutely stellar. But overall, this book really had moments that dragged, and though I loved the ending, the book as a whole isn't sitting with me as high as I really wanted it to. I still am going to continue with the series just because I really want to watch the show and I want to finish the series before the show comes out, but I did end up rating this 3.5 stars. Next, I read volumes 4, 5, and 6 of Saga by Brian K. Vaughan. I don't want to go too deep into this one just because I don't want to spoil the earlier parts of the series, but this is a science fiction graphic novel series, and I think it's my favorite graphic novel series right now. And yeah, this series is really intense overall, but I feel like this middle bit is where it starts to get really intense, and just a lot goes on and a lot goes wrong at every step of the way. And I really loved what I read, and I loved the series, and I'm looking forward to continuing. And I did rate each of these 5 stars. Next up, I reread Heartstopper Volume 1, and I know I said I wasn't going to because I read this book a million times, but then the TV show got announced, and then I was feeling sad this month, so I was like, you know what? This would be a really perfect time to read Heartstopper right now. But yeah, I've talked about this book a bunch. This is just a graphic novel about 2 boys that meet in school and fall in love, and it's really cute and really wholesome, and I love it, and my feelings have not changed. I loved this book just as much as I have all the previous times that I have read it, and I gave it 5 stars. And the next book that I have, I'm actually still reading. I'm a little over halfway through, but I do feel like I get the gist enough to be able to talk about it with you guys, and I will finish this book by the time this video comes out. And that is Normal People by Sally Rooney. But this is a very beloved book about a girl named Mary Ann and a boy named Connell, and in high school, he's really popular and she's kind of weird and no one really likes her, but they meet and they decide to have a relationship, and this book just follows their relationship in high school and then in years following as they go to college and things change in their life, but they still can't seem to stay away from each other. That being said, this book also has some really nice themes in here about class and how people see other people and popularity and things like that, and it's really interesting. I'm not done with it yet, so I don't know my rating, but I will put it in as I'm editing this video. But yeah, so far I'm really liking it. The writing style is so weird. It's very blunt, very straightforward, and also there's no quotation marks like when people talk. It's just the words just straight up. So that was a little hard to get into, but once I was into it, I really was into it. This is also another one of those books where I feel like nothing's really happening, right? In terms of plot, this is very slow and there's no really big events that happen, but I still find this book so interesting. And the characters are really interesting to read from. And it's kind of just them moving through life, and it's not really eventful, but I think that's kind of the point. But yeah, I'm liking it so far. At the time of filming this video, I'll probably finish it in a couple of days and I'll let you guys know what I think. And the last book for this month, again, is another one that I am currently in the middle of, but I will be finishing it by the time this video comes out, and that is We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. This is a YA hard-hitting contemporary novel about a girl whose grandfather has just died, and to escape her grief, she has gone away to school across the country, and she's on winter break, and during her break, one of her old friends from her hometown comes to visit, and she is being forced to sort of confront her past and her grief and what happened. I'm only halfway through, so I can't speak on the whole of the story, but I am really enjoying this so far. We get a sapphic main character who is basically in love with her best friend from back home, and I love what it's adding to the story. I also love how this book is exploring grief, because we do get a lot of flashbacks to when her grandfather was still alive and her relationship with him. And there's also I wouldn't call it a supernatural element, but there's this theme that keeps coming back of ghosts and hauntings, and I'm not really at the point yet where it's fully a part of the story, but I can kind of see the thread that this is going to be something that's delved into, so I'm excited for that. But overall, this is so far really powerful, and it has some really emotional writing, and I'm enjoying it, and I'll let you guys know my rating when I finish it. Alright, so those are all the books that I read in February. If you've read any of these, let me know what you think down below in the comments. But that is all that I have for you today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to be a good person. Bye!